We just had the shooting in Wisconsin at the Sikh temple. Do you know that that is the 5th mass shooting in Wisconsin since 2004 alone?
Okay, so in the last 8 years, Wisconsin had 5 mass shootings with a total of 26 that got killed. That means that 3.25 people a year died in these mass shootings. If you want a better perspective of that, just divide the number of people that died in the mass shootings by the number of people that died in that state. Those 3.25 people a year equals 0.009% of the total state's death rate. Now that 0.009% is so small that you can't even see it on a graph if you compared it to the leading cause of deaths in the state of Wisconsin. In fact, 0.009% is so close to zero that you'd have a better chance comparing it to the number of people who died in Wisconsin because monkeys flew out of their ass, which is 0.
Isn't that amazing? 5 mass shootings in a period of 8 years in one state alone. So when you look at the country overall, since 1982, 58 mass murders.
Okay, let's debunk some anti-gun propaganda sensationalism. Since 1982, there's been 72 million U.S. deaths. Since 1982, 513 mass shooting deaths. Divide the two, you get 710 1/millionth of a percent. Now this number is so low that it should show you that the magnitude of mass shooting deaths in the United States is very close to that number of people that died from monkeys flying out of their ass and then flying in somebody else's ass and killing them too.
58 massacres by guns. But oh, no, of course it's not the guns, right?
Now that the media and this guy has convinced you that mass shootings are so common and so horrifying by all this misinformation, and you believed it, they know they can tell you who to point your angry finger at. Guns.
Except, by the way, 134 guns were possessed by those killers, and 3/4 were obtained legally. Legally.
So those people who wanted strict gun laws, like this guy, pushed for a background check, and they got it. And the good news is that we know that the background checks were done on the majority of these people, because according to the Mother Jones data sheet, where this data was collected from, the majority of these legal firearms purchased were purchased through dealers. And if you're a dealer, you have to have a FLL license, which means you have to have a background check with every firearm exchange. So what this chart is really saying is that these mass shooters are purchasing their weapons and completing their background checks successfully. In short, those who wanted more strict gun laws pushed for their background check and got it, but they were wrong.
And then they say, what? There's no problem with gun laws. We just give them legal guns and then they massacre you over and over and over again.
No, I would put forth that we shouldn't change anything as serious as gun laws until we have a problem that warrants it. Currently, we almost have no problem. It's just media hype sensationalism that targets those who are less able to act rationally, and pretty soon they start to believe it's a big problem.
No problem for the NRA, because then you have to buy more guns in a panic, trying to worry about protecting yourself.
That's an anti-gun myth. The NRA doesn't actually profit off the sale of firearms. The gun manufacturers do.
Here, let me give you a graph to give you a sense of the scale of this as well. In the yellow here, you will see the ones that were obtained legally in these mass shootings, the guns that were.
This is a chart of the Mother Jones data that we looked at earlier that proves that the gun background checks are ineffective at stopping mass murders.
And then the blue is unknown and green is no.
This is what the actual chart should look like. Mother Jones is one of the most liberal bias media outlets in the country. What they did is they took all the firearms of unknown origin and by default attached those as legal possession. If you remove that error, you get just below 60% purchased legally. Not that big of a difference.
You know, they always say, well, they're going to get it one way or another, even if they have to get it illegally. Yeah, but you see, they got it a lot less illegally.
Now, I would have guessed he would have made an argument that made it more difficult to get guns to decrease those who obtain weapons legally. Instead, his argument is some means that will decrease those weapons obtained illegally.
it would have been harder to get illegally. Instead, they got most of it legally.
By obvious examination of all those weapons obtained illegally, the one thing they all have in common is they were all stolen. So essentially, his argument comes down to the fact that if we can figure out a way to keep these mass murderers from stealing, we could possibly decrease the mass murders.
All right, now, they always say, oh, we need guns. We need as many guns and as different kind of guns as we possibly need. And besides, what difference does it make? Well, it makes a huge difference for two reasons. One, semi-automatic guns are used more in these killings. And two, they kill more people. So let's show you a graph on that. Semi-automatic handguns. You see that? By far the most used in these mass shootings since 1982. Assault weapons, second highest. Then you go to revolvers. Then you go to shotguns.
One of the problems with this chart that jumps out at you is that there's no category for centerfire rifles, nor is there a category for regular semi-automatic rifles. They've lumped all of those into the category of assault rifles, which means all rifles.
So that's what we're trying to tell you to do. We're trying to say, hey, can we find a reasonable limit on semi-automatic handguns and assault rifles?
When he says we, he must be talking about his Young Turks group. Since the majority of these firearms were purchased legally, there was a background check done at the point of sale. With that being said, when he uses the term reasonable limits, he must mean that background checks on the vast majority of those rifles was unreasonable. And lastly, when he uses the term semi-automatic weapons and assault rifles, he means all firearms except shotguns and revolvers. So this guy believes that we should break through the Bill of Rights to put a reasonable limit on all firearms except shotguns and revolvers for the sake of a problem that is almost non-existent as monkeys flying out of your ass.
Because they keep getting used in these massacres where innocent civilians are killed, and more of them every single day.
You can't have a mass shooting death every day. There's only about 22 a year, which means you can only have one person die every 16 and a half days. Once again, he demonstrates that he has no clue of the magnitude of mass shooting.
And you know, after the last shooting in Aurora, Colorado, I said, you know, I think we're past the tipping point here. I think this stuff's going to happen all the time. And I mean, already it was happening at a gigantic pace, but I think that it's going to pick up steam. I said it then, and look at it now. Picking up steam. And you think we're done? We're not even close to done. There will be more mass shootings, one after another after another.
Just when you thought this guy was halfway rational, he starts in with the media hype again.
We've tipped the scales here. Everybody's got guns. And so, you know, and these guys want to shoot people, other guys want to shoot back.
If he's still referring to the data collected in his Mother Jones report, you won't find any data of anyone shooting back. This is because the data was taken directly out of recent news stories covering the shootings. And no mainstream news source would ever headline an article about a gun being used for good.
Now there's, you know, in a state like Wisconsin, you know that they have open carry laws, meaning you don't need a permit, you don't need to be trained, you can carry a gun on you, visible. If, because of a new law passed, if you don't want to show your gun, you want it concealed, well, then you got to do permit and training. And a lot of the NRA people are flipping out over that. How dare you? But look, the cops are the ones that say, no, 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 I need you to at least have a permit so I can know that if I'm approaching a guy, whether he has a legal right to have that gun or not.
No, that's preposterous. Because firearms are legal in this country, when a police officer has to approach you to see if the gun's legal or not, that's guilty until being proven innocent.
If they carry it out in the open, they don't even need the permit.
Yeah, in America, you have the right to bear an arm and it shall not be infringed. It's not a difficult concept. You know, if you come from Turkey, you want to read the laws of the country you move to, not get here and then figure them out and complain about them.
They're saying if you're hiding the gun, can the cops at least know whether you're dangerous or you're a legal holder of that gun?
Absolutely not. This is not a tyrannical government. You can't detain and question somebody unless there's probable cause. I find it offensive this guy even has American flag waving behind him.
Of course, but no, there's no limit to this insanity.
Since when has due process of law been insane?
Do you know 3 states at least, Alaska, Arizona, and Vermont, already have what they call a constitutional carry system? That means you don't need a permit or training to have an open carry or a concealed carry.
Well, that would explain why they call it a constitutional system. You know, I'm really starting to believe that this guy doesn't like guns just because he hates freedom. It can't be a sorrow of the victims because they're almost non-existent in comparison.
So you just walk around with a gun? No permit, no nothing.
Not to mention they don't even require a government permit to speak freely, saying what they want, risking offending people. I bet that irritates the hell out of this dude.
Cops don't know who's got the legal guns, the illegal guns. They can't even check. Once they checked 5 guys in a diner and got in huge trouble in Wisconsin.
As well they should have in this country. The police cannot be allowed to be thugs. The police should only be able to detain and question people if they're suspected of committing a crime.
And those guys are suing them. Guys are like, well, somebody called it in. There 5 guys came in with a gun. And we were worried. So the cops went in and checked in. They said, how dare you? You better not check anybody with guns anymore. Because the NRA is in charge.
You are a meathead.
FYI, the Supreme Court isn't actually under the NRA.
And then they turn around, and one of the arguments that they make is, no, it's okay. Concealed carry hasn't caused problems in other states.
If you believe police officers are good guys with guns, concealed weapon permit holders is the next best thing. The majority have required class training, squeaky clean records, and tend to spend more time on the pistol range or rifle range than most. When an officer realizes that he's dealing with a concealed weapon permit holder, he is put at ease knowing he's not dealing with a criminal. Concealed weapon permit holders are the last group you'll ever tie murder rates to.
What on God's green earth are you talking about? We have 58 massacres on our hands. Which states did they not cause problems in?
This guy ought to be embarrassed for some of the outrageous things that he says. This nutjob just went full retard by claiming that all the mass shooters in the last 30 years were CCW permit carrier holders. The only way he could ever claim to have any clue to how many of the mass shooters had registered concealed carry weapons permits would have been if he did a study.
By the way, Violence Policy Center says since May of 2007 alone, 309 people killed by legal carriers of weapons.
Leave it to a progressive to demonize those law-abiding citizens who had to protect their own life. Where in the hell do these people come from?
And of those, 11 were police officers.
Yes, off-duty police officers are CCWs as well. When they're on duty, they are to serve and protect. Once they're off duty, their weapon becomes nothing more than an evil killing machine.
One of the guys who did that was Jared Lee Loeffner. He also was a legal carrier of guns.
Okay, so now you got a mass shooter who was a concealed weapon permit holder. One is not a problem in 30 years.
309 people killed in mass shootings.
309 mass shooters or shootings? No. You just said 309 were legal carriers of firearms.
And they say, oh, no. You see, concealed carry doesn't have any problems.
Well, no, you found one. Jared Lee Loeffner. One in 30 years, you retard. This is where the media-induced hype comes from, is people like this.
It has huge problems.
Mass shootings kill so few people in this country that if you put it in a bar chart, you couldn't even see the line. If you take the number of annual U.S. deaths, which is about 2,571,000, and divide it by 22 mass shooting deaths per year, you get 8.7 times 10 to the negative 6. That means that mass shootings are responsible for killing about 1/millionth of the population. So get a grip. 1/millionth is not a huge problem unless you've lost all ability to gain a perspective.
Us carrying around all these semi-automatic and assault rifles and all these things is literally killing us. Tip of the iceberg. You think this happened quickly? It's going to happen again and again and again because there is no limit to this.